So I'd like to welcome you all to the second and final session of this year's grad app course. After a successful completion of yesterday's session that was based on the statement of purpose for master's program as well as academic CV writing, today's session is based on the statement of purpose for PhD programs as well as advice on how to reach out to your potential advisors. I would begin by introducing our speakers, all of whom have graduated from LUMS in 2021. We firstly have Maliha, who's currently doing her PhD from Urbana, Champaign. We then have Mohammad Haris Noor, who's doing his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And last but not the least, we have Bilal Naeem, who is doing his PhD from Purdue University. I would firstly ask the speakers to introduce themselves and talk about what their research interests are, as well as telling us about where they applied, what else universities they applied to last year, and most importantly, to talk about how their grad school is going. So the speakers can start. Maliha, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I am Liha, and I just graduated last year, and I was a TA for almost a lot of you last year, maybe the year before that. I worked with Dr. Hassan at LUMS, and towards the end of my research, I was also working with Dr. Zafar. Other than that, a bunch of places that I applied to were obviously UIUC. I applied to NYU, also some places in Germany. I applied for the Erasmus Mundus as well, and a few other universities in the US that I can't seem to remember. I remember they were Northeastern, but yeah, maybe Bilal can continue. I'm sure you'll have a better list to share.
Yeah, so my name is Bilal Naeem, and I was working with Dr. Farid for the most part before applying for the PhD. And I also worked on a project with Dr. Rashid, who is a student of Dr. Farid. And so I basically worked in the research on the research of the privacy and internet measurement side. I worked in in that area and actually applied for PhDs in systems and security in basically 5 universities. This again was not a long list. So it was Purdue, and then it was Northeastern. It was University of Arizona, Iowa State University, University of Arizona, and there was and there was NC State University as well. So my list was quite short, and the other university I got into Purdue, and here I am working on operating systems, Linux kernel, and stuff like that.
Would you guys also like to talk about?
Yeah, I think both of us had this really long talk about it last night, and I think we all agree that the experience is the same. We are definitely missing on the food, and we are having a hard time meeting people. Other than that, we are lost. But it's okay. I guess one thing I did not know about grad school before coming here was that you cannot phantom the amount of paper it did expect you to read. So so I guess it's just weird, but it's still the first semester. So I guess at least I'm taking easy on myself. But yeah, this is how it is.
Yeah, so it is pretty much the same for me, I guess. But I'm doing an RSA with my advisor right now. So the expectations from him are like burdening up on me. But yeah, so for me it was the problem was that I started to work during my PhD in a totally different field as compared to my undergrad. So that was a problem. But you realize after some time you face some problems, and you think that you are the first one to actually come across these problems. But as you move forward, if you are facing some problem at the start of your program, it is not an unusual thing, and it is possible to get a good PhD even if you are struggling at the start. Yeah, so just going through this roller coaster of the emotions right now. So yeah, probably hoping for the best.
Right, so we'll move on and we'll first start with the speakers. You'll give us an overview of your statement of purpose for your PhD. We'd also like you to share your perspective on how to structure it. And you might also want to discuss how you wrote your statement of purpose. Give us an insight into what went through your head and your experience in writing it.
Okay, I think I can just introduce the general thing that Bilal, me, and Haris had in mind. So what we talked about last night was we're thinking about dividing the SOP into 4 structures. Like we'll first begin talking about the introduction, and then we'll come to research, because this is literally the exact order we wrote our SOPs in as well. So we have the introduction, we have the research, we have the TA work and coursework, because we merge it together. Usually you don't need to put a lot of it. So this is why it's just together. And the conclusion, which is also the same as reaching out to people. Yeah. So I guess we'll begin talking about our introduction. I think I can give a brief overview and then Bilal can continue. And you can stop me, Bilal, if you want to talk in the middle. And if Haris joins in as well, he's free to as well.
Yeah, sure.
So the thing about the introduction is the thing about the SOPs in general. Like after years of writing for creativity, for attention grabbing, for everything, you feel very obligated to insert a story into your SOP. And just the thing with that is you need to make sure you do not get into that thing, because that was the biggest mistake I did with my first SOP. That I was just blurting out so much garbage that it just turned out to a story, which was obviously a good story, but it wasn't what people look for. So I think the first thing about an SOP and the first thing about an introduction is do not jump from somewhere else and then try to dive into the topic. Just get and it still needs to be attention grabbing though. So that is something which you have to think about. I would suggest the first way to start an introduction would be to like write down all the things that you think are super great, super cool about yourself. And you don't have to be so hard on yourself. The whole thing about this SOP is making do with what you have. So whatever it is you have, at least first keep that in front of you and know that what your ground is. And once you have that ready, try fitting it into places, see what could go in the top, see what could go in the middle. The general purpose of the introduction, in my opinion, is introducing yourself, maybe giving a gist of what is to come. Like maybe you can just talk about the project that you have, like maybe in a word, maybe just hint it, and give an idea of what it is, what area it is that's interesting you. Yeah, and like I mean, so I can share my SOP as well, but maybe Bilal can talk first, and then we can go over one of ours.
Yeah, sure. So one thing about writing the SOP, like Maliha mentioned, there's this urge to make it more interesting or attention grabbing at first. So what I did was that for me, every time I started to write my SOP, it felt like that the first part, the introductory part, attention grabbing enough, or it did not have that much punch. So I was not going ahead of that part, so it was a big problem. So what I did was, it might not work for everyone, but what I did was, I basically for the first draft, I turned the font into white, and then I started writing everything that came into my mind comes to my mind brainstorming stuff. So I wrote my first draft that way, and after that I looked into it. What are the things that that should be removed, or what are the things that can be polished and stuff like that. So for the introductory part, one more thing is that I will talk a bit about how since my undergrad research was not exactly what I did in what I'm doing in the PhD. So there might be this idea that you have to go for the PhD in the same domain that on which you are working on right now. So for example, if you are working on programming languages or stuff like that, you might be able to do the PhD, you will get an admission in the PhD in the same field as well. So on that part, I thought of actually working in the systems, and I had an idea that I want to work in the systems, but my experience from my undergrad was not actually aligned with the systems research. It was more of the privacy research and internet measurement research, and sometimes a little bit of the programming languages research. So what I did was that I focused on the general part. Like I said that okay, I looked at security as a subdomain of the system, and I wrote my SOP from that point of view. And I think that actually helped in getting those admissions and stuff like that. So it would be a good idea if you are trying to do that, to be more general or be more specific at points regarding that. Okay. Yeah. So That is one thing, and yeah, I guess Maliha can we can move forward to the next part.
Okay. I can also share my SOP as well, like the introduction, because we said we would do it one by one. So I have my whole introduction right in front of me. And if you guys want, I can do a quick over on what I thought was interesting. Also, I'm just giving like a disclaimer that like, don't laugh at me. Like I was a year younger when I wrote this. So yeah. So yeah. So one thing I don't think I mentioned about myself was my research area. Yeah, so which was very rude of me. So at LUMS, I was working with Dr. Asan on federated learning, and I applied generally to distributed systems groups. So I'm currently working with one as well. But yeah, like just for reference. So I guess both Bilal and I are same in the sense that both of us are kind of sort of in systems. But yeah, so I decided to tell my class rank as my opening statement, and not everybody has that, not everybody wants to do that, and maybe this isn't that much smart of an option as well. But at that time I thought it was cool. I thought it made me stand out, so I did mention it. And then I jumped straight into the topic. I jumped straight into why I want to do a PhD. I think the main thing about a PhD and what makes it so different from any other kind of academic programs you'll apply to is the fact that I think it's not the knowledge that they're looking for. I mean, I have a considerable amount of very less systems knowledge than a lot of my peers do, because I did not have any relevant courses at LUMS to take. So it wasn't the knowledge they're going for. It's more about how you can show them that you are passionate about the topic, also how determined you are to do it. Because I mean, it's a long program. They do not want you to, if you come in and if you leave after 3 years, they're not going to fight you that you need to stay till that your death over here. You know, you need to finish your PhD. It's just going to be that they're going to let you go, and you'll be considered like a bad investment for them, like for your advisor, because they'll be funding you to be there. So you have to make sure that you were able to convince them through your SOP that you intend on coming for the PhD and completing it. And you're passionate and confident enough to do it. And I think that is a tone you should try and highlight in your SOP as well, that you're able to convince the next person that this is what you want to do and this is what you do plan on continuing and finishing. So that being said, so I jumped straight into the topic. I mentioned that I wanted to work in systems and networks. I gave a brief explanation on why I wanted to do it. And like I said, that you could subtly mention in hints about what to expect. This is exactly what I did. So I mentioned about how my research project, which was on federated learning, really helped me understand it and really helped me understand what I wanted to do, and like how it eventually did turn up in systems and networks. So I just gave a brief overview of that. I told them how some courses really did reinforce my choice. So this is like giving them a hint that they should be expecting something about my courses later on in the SOP as well. And yeah, I also shared one liner about what I wanted to do after. Something different about my SOP is, so I ended up giving a second area of interest as well. So this SOP is the exact same one I sent to UIUC where I am currently. And so while I did want to go for systems and networks, I always thought that computer science education is something really cool. And I thought about just applying for it. So over here, in these next 5, 6, 7, 8 lines, I am talking about my secondary area, which I would like if they considered me in, or I'm also talking about coupling it with my current area as well. I think the thing about writing an SOP and going through the whole process is that you want to make sure that your options are as broad as possible, even if they actually aren't. But showing that they are really improves your chances, because I think it's very simple to say that it's the fact that faculty is hiring you instead of the university. So there isn't a fixed quota that they're looking for. It's more about how much funding they have, who is looking, who wants students, and who thinks you're cool. I mean, I'm pretty sure a lot of people will think you're cool, but it's also about who thinks you're cool enough for them to fund you and spend so many rupees on you, right? So broadening your options is always good. I also was in the student council, and I mean, I feel like I worked 2 years for that, so I did want to mention it somewhere. So I forced it into it. I mean, ideally, you don't mention your extracurriculars in a PhD SOP, but I forced it into it. So yeah. I think this is all about introductions, at least what I have to say. Bilal, if you want to add in something, we can do that. I think we can also take questions about the introduction right now.
Yeah, we can.
That would really help. If you guys have any questions about the introduction, maybe you want to discuss some generic scenarios of, let's say you're working in something, but then you're doing something else, how to tackle that, something like that, then we're open for questions. Okay, I don't think anybody has questions. Maybe we can just move on. Okay, so the next part of the SOP, which is, quite frankly speaking, the most important part of your SOP, which comes in, is your research stuff, right? So we have the introduction, which is like 1 paragraph. My introduction is super long. I would say even 200 words is good enough. Mine is long because you're supposed to maintain it, but because I mentioned like a secondary area, so I guess this is why it was okay that it's a little long, right? But the next part, that is your main part. You have to make sure that majority of your essay consists of that part. Now, one tone I do want to set over here is the fact that you guys are at a time where you can't really change something major in your profile. So it's okay if you have 1 project. It's okay if you have 2 projects. It's okay if you have 3 projects. I think Haris isn't here, but he was just telling us last night that he only had 1 project, but he still managed to like get paragraphs out of that project as well. So I think the biggest disclaimer that goes over here is it's okay if you do not have a lot of projects, or if you think that you do not have a lot of projects. It's mostly about how you portray that you have stuff that really helps in the SOP. So if I give a big background about myself, I had 2 research projects, and obviously there was nothing I could do, right? It's not like I can produce another project out of nowhere. So what I did was, for my main project, which I spent a year and a half on, I wrote a lot about it. And for my secondary one, it was a shorter paragraph, but still big enough to not make somebody look like she does not have a research experience, right? What to mention about research experience is, okay, fine. Like you have a project, you mention it, and maybe you mention the name as well of your supervisor, which is not so crucial mentioning. But if you feel like you have the space, you can mention it. I mean, I remember one of my works was a collaboration, and I ended up mentioning like at least one other author who was like not a and that you're taking up a lot of space just by mentioning people's name, which doesn't really matter, right? So yeah, space is very crucial, and you have to make sure that everything you put in is relevant and it will help you, right? That being said, what goes on about the project is maybe a brief introduction of what your end goal was and what the problem was. I think this isn't something I followed with in my SOP, but after coming to grad school and reading reading research papers, I'd say it's really important to explain to the person, like before explaining the problem, it's really important to explain that why the problem is a problem. So I would suggest you guys do that. Like when you have a research problem, maybe to you it's important because you're working on it or your advisor thinks it's cool, but the next person will not know a lot about it, right? So 1 second. I'm so sorry about this. So this is my friend. He's just making me laugh the whole time. He even put a question in the chat. Significance of CGPA. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so where was I? I was mentioning, yes, motivating the problem is super important. So in your research statement, make sure you at least have like enough content to ensure that your problem is important. But I mean, don't make the whole paragraph about your problem as well. And once you have the motivation of the problem as well, maybe give your solution. And then you have to talk about your role of what you did exactly. So if you remember, what I mentioned was, it is very important to prove to the person reading this that you are credible enough and motivated enough to do a PhD. And you have the skills. But the skills over here are not technical skills. The skills over here are the ones that show them you know how to do research. So if you have experience reading papers, if you have experience writing papers, if you have experience working with somebody who was writing a paper, if you have experience with starting a project, with coming up an idea, with developing it, these are very soft skills as per, writing a whole system or all that. But all of these skills are equally important. So if you have that, mention it. Yeah, and I think I'll let Bilal talk for now.
Yeah, So actually, I guess during this part, it would be a good idea to let them know. So as Maliha mentioned that it is the SOP is about showing them that you can do research and you are passionate enough for the research. So even if so it would be a good idea to let them know what kind of skills you learned during this project, and what kind of the technical, for example, let's say some new tool you learned about, or some you got some new programming experience, and you dealt with the really complex or really unique programming structures or something like that, and you let them know that I learned about these things during this project. So it would be a good how this helps is it actually lets them know that even if you don't know about the stuff, you can actually learn given the resources and resources. So yeah, and one more thing, like about naming the people who were your research collaborators. What I did was I mentioned the people who were my research collaborators, but I did not mention everyone who was my research collaborator. I only mentioned those who were like the more important one, or who could make an impact on my PhD application. For example, I even mentioned, for example, Dr. Rashid had just completed his PhD from the UIUC, so I mentioned that he's a UIUC PhD alum, something like that, in 2 to 3 words or something like that. So yeah, and there was a guy who was a Facebook security engineer, so I mentioned his post as well, because yeah, it added a bit of the credibility to my research. And then one more thing is probably explaining not only the motivation but the end result, and how it impacted the general public, or what were the larger impact of your research. And sometimes it might be implicit to you what are the research impacts of your project, but it might not be clear to these people who are reading your SOP that how this research could have impacted like your whole community, or if you are doing some vulnerability analysis, how it could have impacted your community. And describing those things could be really helpful during this part as well. So yeah, I guess we can move forward.
So maybe I can begin first. Okay, yeah, maybe I can show you guys what I was talking about when I said that I only had like one major project and come projects say according to my advisor. So this was my paragraph on my research. So this was my main research, which was on federated learning. So federated learning was a huge name. So sometime in the introduction, I just marked it as FL, and then I just used FL again and again. You have to make sure that not even a single word in your SOP is wasted. Like, is that important? Because the moment you start blabbering, the moment you start not making sense, people are going to get bored, and you do not want them to do that. You do not want them to do that. That would just ruin your chances by so much. One thing I would like to add is the SOP is not make or break it. Like it's not like you have a super good profile and then your SOP was just average and then they're going to reject you, right? But it's just overall about you. It's overall what somebody who has never met you, never interacted with you, does not know your academic career, that's how they're going to look at you. So I mean, I think it's in your best interest to work on it, to be nice to it, and to let it be nice to you as well. But it's not the end of the world if it's not. If you feel like it's a little less, you can always make up through other ways as well, right? Yes, so this was my project, the first one. One thing interesting about this project was that during this project, I worked a lot about building this application. Like not a lot, but like it took me a while to get started on React Native and to continue working on it. But as you can imagine, I mean, I want to go into systems and networks, and I'm definitely talking about developing a mobile application. Yeah, but it was a huge thing, right? So I have two options over here. You can either brag about it or you can just say one sentence about it. So the first, obviously my instinct was to brag about it, but said it's not something directly relevant to what I hope to do. And so maybe just telling people that I know how to develop an app is not going to be as fruitful for me as it would be if I use the same space to tell something about a research skill. Like maybe I learned about um, how to map a paper onto like an actual system, because that is a very important research skill. So you have to pick and choose on what you're applying to and what you want to say and the way you want to say it. Harsh had this really, really, really good thing about saying like how he converted one of his project to a different area he was applying, I think. And I really like Harsh to share that. I feel like it'd be really good for people to know. So sorry I'm forcing this on you, Harsh, but please tell people.
अच्छा, तो मेरा सीन ये था कि मेरा सिर्फ एक रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट था जो कि मैंने डॉक्टर फरीद के साथ ही किया था। उससे पहले मैंने कोई रिसर्च नहीं की थी। मैंने स्टार्ट मतलब जैसे सब करते हैं नॉर्मली समर्स में किया था, और प्रोजेक्ट काफी काफी मतलब काफी एंड तक गया था, तो इसलिए बस उसी पे काम करते रहते हैं एंड तक। मगर ये था कि लेकिन जैसे बाकियों ने फिर भी काफी कोई और प्रोजेक्ट भी किए हुए थे, लाइक किसी और इंस्ट्रक्टर के साथ किया होता कोई ना कोई काम। तो मैंने सिर्फ एक ही किया होता। तो मेरा ये था कि लाइक सबको ये होता है ना कि सब ये कहते हैं कि लाइक आपको 3 पैराग्राफ होने चाहिए आपके रिसर्च पेपर के ऊपर। तो लाइक मुझे समझ नहीं आता कि मैं 3 पैराग्राफ कहाँ से लाऊं वो। तो मैंने उसी प्रोजेक्ट को काइंड ऑफ लाइक ब्रेक किया था 2 पार्ट्स में। लाइक पहला वाला उसमें मैंने 2 सब पैराग्राफ्स में डिवाइड कर दिया था, और लाइक उसको काइंड ऑफ ऐसे प्रेजेंट किया था कि वो 2 अलग प्रोजेक्ट्स थे। और लाइक फर्स्ट हाफ में मैंने ये लिख दिया था, लाइक जो मैंने समर्स में काम किया था, फिर उससे आगे जो काम किया था वो मैंने सेकंड पैराग्राफ में कर दिया था। और फिर जो थर्ड पैराग्राफ था उसमें मैंने ये किया था कि मैंने अपना एक आई थिंक डीप लर्निंग का असाइनमेंट को एज अ प्रोजेक्ट बताया था। हाँ, आई थिंक डीप लर्निंग का कोई असाइनमेंट थी वो। हाँ, तो आप लोग ये भी कर सकते हो, जरूरी नहीं कि आपके 3-4 प्रोजेक्ट्स हों, या बस अगर एक भी है तो आप उसको भी इस तरह प्रेजेंट कर सकते हो कि वो 2 प्रोजेक्ट्स लगे। अब जैसे मैं यहाँ पे अपनी शेयर कर रहा हूँ, कितने सेकंड। अच्छा, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, ours you
Okay,
can.
perfect. अच्छा, अच्छा जैसे ये था, यहाँ से स्टार्ट हो रहा है। अच्छा, ये सारा पे चल रहा है, और यहाँ पे फिर मैंने नेक्स्ट वाले में लाइक फॉर माय अंडरग्रेजुएट थीसिस कर दिया उसी चीज को। मगर कस्टमर्स लाइक प्रोजेक्ट वही चल रहा है, तो मगर हाँ लेकिन अब उनको शायद ऐसा लग रहा हो कि शायद 2 डिफरेंट प्रोजेक्ट्स थे, और मेरे 2 पैराग्राफ से पूरे हो गए। लेकिन पहला वाला काफी बड़ा पैराग्राफ, सेकंड उसके बाद वाला मैं सेकंड में डाल दिया, और लास्ट में हमने लिख दिया था। अच्छा, बाय द वे, अगर आपका हो ना कि आपको कोई पेपर है, मगर अगर आपने सबमिट नहीं करवाया तो डिफरेंट चीज होती है। मगर आपने अगर सबमिट करवा दिया है ना, तो अब मैंने तो वो लिख दिया था डायरेक्टली यहाँ पे, और मैंने एसओपी में भी उसमें सीवी में भी लिख दिया था कि हमने सबमिट करवाया हुआ है। तो क्योंकि हाँ ये मैटर करता है, उनको पता था एटलीस्ट हमने सबमिट करवाया हुआ है। वो बाकी ने मुझसे वो जो मीटिंग्स होती हैं उनमें भी पूछते हैं कि हाँ अच्छा आपने सबमिट करवाया, किस कॉन्फ्रेंस में कराया हुआ है, क्योंकि उनको पता होता है कि अब जैसे मेरी नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न वाली एडवाइजर थी, हाँ उसने वो पता नहीं उस वाली कॉन्फ्रेंस की चेयर थी उस टाइम पे, ऐसा कुछ था। तो लाइक उसे इसलिए शायद उसने मुझे शायद पता नहीं शायद ऑफर लेटर सेंड किया था, पता नहीं शायद उसका आइडिया था कि मतलब क्योंकि उस कॉन्फ्रेंस में कोई पेपर वगैरह वर्क कर रहे हो तो उसका फिर लिख सकते हो कि लाइक अभी अभी हम उस पर वर्क कर रहे हैं, हमने पब्लिश नहीं किया, सबमिट नहीं करवाया। मगर अगर सबमिट करवाया तो काफी फिर सीन, लाइक अगर चेक नहीं भी हुआ ना, क्योंकि हमारा पेपर ऑनेस्टली हमारा पेपर रिजेक्ट हो गया था, बाद में रिजेक्ट हो गया था। तो मगर मगर जब तब तक नहीं हुआ था कि जब तक हमारे ऑफर लेटर आ गए, तो उसके बाद ही हुआ था। तो हाँ तब तक आप लिख सकते हो क्योंकि आपने तो सबमिट करवाया हुआ है। और बाकी आई थिंक यही था कि हाँ अगर आपका एक रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट है तो इतना मसला नहीं है। मेरा भी एक ही था और मैंने उसी को ही डिवाइड कर दिया था। जैसे मेरे ये 2 पैराग्राफ इसके हैं, फर्स्ट रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट है, और उसके बाद मेरा जो थर्ड पैराग्राफ है, हाँ हाँ ये सीवी का एक कहाँ गया, हाँ हाँ ये बिल्कुल एक काइंड ऑफ एक फेसबुक कंपटीशन था ऑनलाइन, फेसबुक नहीं था, नहीं उस पे था, केगल पे था। हाँ कंप्यूटर विजन का एक प्रोजेक्ट था, तो हमने बस थोड़ा बहुत काम किया था, तो हमने बस उसको बस थोड़ा सा बढ़ा चढ़ा के लिख दिया। और बाकी मैंने ये देखो नीचे बस वही लिखी हुई है, जैसे मैंने मेरे जो असाइनमेंट थी ना, लाइक ये देखो कि यहाँ पे यहाँ से नीचे असाइनमेंट है मेरी, ये भी डीप लर्निंग की असाइनमेंट थी, उससे नीचे ये भी डीप लर्निंग की असाइनमेंट है। तो हाँ आप वो भी लिख सकते हो। तो या आई थिंक ये था कि अगर एक प्रोजेक्ट है तो इतना मसला नहीं है, आप उसी को भी लिख सकते हो कि हाँ, क्योंकि मोस्टली का यही होता है ना कि आप समर्स में स्टार्ट करते हो, तो समर्स में जब स्टार्ट करोगे टिल द एंड वो चलता ही रहता है, तो इसीलिए मोस्टली का एक प्रोजेक्ट होता है। तो क्योंकि वो काफी लंबा प्रोजेक्ट है, तब उसे आराम से लिख सकते हो मेरे ख्याल से। तो इसे डिवाइड कर लो इसी तरह के 2 पार्ट्स में, कि अच्छा पहले हम इस पे काम करते रहे थे और फिर बाद में हमने फिगर आउट किया कि अच्छा अब हम इसको थोड़ा इस डायरेक्शन में लेके जाते हैं। तो जहाँ पे वो चेंज आएगा ना, तो आप उसको वहाँ आप डिवाइड कर सकते हो आई थिंक, लाइक हाँ जैसे जैसे मैंने समर्स और अपना सेमेस्टर वाइज डिवाइड किया।
हाँ, by this पे एक और point, if you are working in a research group, like you are working with 4 or 5 more students, and if you made some core contributions to the project, it would be a good idea to mention these. like I would probably advise you to talk with your research colleagues or your other friend, and tell them that this is what you are writing about in the project. You are writing in about the project in your SOP, and tell them that I made this contribution and I'm writing about it. If you designed or if you programmed something that is fundamental to the project, to design the main from framework or something like that, you can write in the SOP, and it will probably make a good impact on your SOP as well. And yeah, and one more thing. Yeah, so I had a project. I had a project where which was not related to research at all. This was a local software house with whom I worked outside of my bachelor's for a Windows software or Windows software. It was a service, and so I so at the end I was short of the content. So what I did was I added this part, but clearly this was not going to contribute to my SOP. If this was simply that I it was simply written that I worked on a programming gig, and it would not have added much. But what I did was I mentioned that this was a Windows. First of all, this was related somehow to the lower level systems, because we are using the Windows API to create these services. So if you mention it like that, it will probably have a better impact. And then I mentioned that it was a large code base. So they had a legacy code which was like I don't know how old, and it was too big. And I mentioned that I made changes to this large legacy code. And what it did was it probably convinced my advisors, or my current advisor, that I can work on the large code, and I can work on the stuff that is too old, or I'm not too unfamiliar to the complexity of the large code bases. So yeah, so if you frame it the right way, and if you describe the impact of it properly, it might be a good impact, even if it is not entirely related to your research.
I think the whole part of this is the fact that you really can play with words, and you really should
Yeah.
be playing with words. Like, never settle for anything less. If you think that your project is not good enough, they don't have to know that. Your words don't have to say that.
Yep.
You can talk about anything.
Yep.
Like, if I'm honest, I don't know if you guys feel the same way or not, but so my project was really long. So 6 months in, if I'm just sitting there and reflecting back on the past 6 months, and I'm like, what did I do? मैंने क्या किया था? Like, मतलब मेरी क्या contribution थी? तो मैं शायद blank ही हूँ. I just go like, oh, like all I did was like make this model. Is that enough for me to mention? But that's okay. That happens, and it's okay. They don't have to know that. Like, obviously, don't lie about आपने क्या किया, क्या नहीं किया. But if you feel like you even helped somebody जो model बना रहा था, then you should say कि I played a very crucial part in developing the model, because you did, right? Yeah, so that is really important, and just know that it's really important to play with words. I think at this point we can take questions for um, research. I think we've all said what we had to say, which is quite a lot on just the research part. So if you guys have a question, you can ask it, or you can type it in the chat. And I think till that time, I'll reply to my dear friend's message because he was really interested in me answering it. So he's interested in knowing that, can the speakers please have a take on the significance of CGPA, as in how big of an issue it is it to get in for someone who has a below DSL CGPA? Yeah, so I feel like it would be very ironical for me to answer this question, but I would still say that at the end of the day, you have a finite number of accomplishments, achievements, profile that you will have. And I think instead of being upset about maybe you not having a certain thing, I think it's time to like act more serious and know what you want. Because if you know what you want, you'll mold things around it. So let's say you have a bad CGPA, you should realize that somewhere or the other, one way in your application, you have to make up for that. But that being said, it's not impossible to do it as well. I mean, people with a wide variety of CGPA from LUMS have gone to university and to grad school. Like, it's not impossible. It's just about how well you manage to sell yourself. This is literally that. Like, you're literally, at least for a PhD program, you are selling yourself to people so that they can fund you for like 5 years. So I don't know if you guys know, but PhDs in Americas are like funded, right? So it's not something as simple like that. You will be your family will be paying tuition and they're going to just keep you. It's more about somebody will choose to fund you, and you will also get a stipend, which is like really good.
Not
Like,
all PhDs.
Not all PhDs, but it's a very common practice over here. And if you're not getting
Got
funded for your PhD, then you should tell the PhD to please bye, I'm not coming, because you deserve the money. It's already going to be less, which you're going to realize later. But yeah, so you're selling yourself, and you have to make sure you do a good job of it. And your CGPA is not super important. Like, I don't think I've come here and I felt like a genius just because I had like a 3.9 something at lungs, right? Because nobody really makes you feel that way. And I mean, nobody should make you feel that way as well, because even during your time at Lums, you should have realized by now that yes, CGPA is important, but there's only so much it can get you to. Like, I mean, I got rejected from internships with like a straight 4.0 as well. Like, it's a practical. See what you can do to make up. And if you think that there's nothing you can do to make up, then I feel like I definitely encourage you to talk to someone who can help you realize what you're not seeing, because sometimes you tend to be really mean on yourself.
I had a question related to the research projects part that you mentioned. So, all of you, I think all of you mentioned that you had this one long project that started in summer and like prolonged for a year. But in cases where, say, one has like 3-4 projects and all of them were around 3-4 months, something like that, how should one divide that in the SOP? And should they still mention one main project and then the smaller ones in a paragraph? Or should they just focus on individual and give equal weightage to all of them?
Okay, one thing I do want to mention is, so let's say you have 4 projects and you want to work in systems and networks, and all of them relate to system and networks, then that's good. Then I feel like if you just mediocrely mention them one over the other, maybe what is more important to you, what is more relevant to what you want to do, put that on top and then put the others at the bottom, right? But if there's a scenario where all of them are in different fields, right? Because that might be possible as well. Let's say in the summer you wanted to work with Dr. Mubin, then you realized she wasn't for you, you went to somebody, they were working on something else and you joined, stuff like that. In that way, I think it's very important to relate to the fact that what it is that you want to get in the most, right? If you're writing your SOP about privacy, then mention your privacy project first. If you're writing about architecture, then write your architecture project, because it wouldn't make sense for you to emphasize the other ones as much as you want to. That being said, you should still mention the other ones, because like I mentioned, the skills that they're looking for are not your knowledge, not how much you know on the topic. It's more about how well you can do research, which at the end of the day is same across disciplines.
Yeah.
Bilal, how do you add? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was the person who had 3 or 4 projects and all of them were like probably midway. So what I did was I mentioned the project that had the most impact as the first thing in my in my research part of my SOP. So the project that made it to a conference, it was not accepted into a conference, but it was submitted for a conference, and I thought that it would be better to mention it as the first thing. And then what I did was I did not give equal weightage to all of my projects, again because of the PhD programs that I was targeting. I mentioned some of these I tried to mention these projects. I tried to give more space to the projects that somehow highlighted how I could work in systems, or that somehow could highlight that I am good for research. I learned new things. I made some core contributions to the project. The other project that were not so much like centric or like me centric, I did not mention them as much in my SOP. So that is something you can do. You can think about the PhD program that you are applying. You can think about your own contributions, and you can think about the academic contributions of this project, and you can sum up.
और इसमें ये भी होता है कि अगर आप प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं ना, जैसे आप एक यूनिवर्सिटी में आपको कोई एडवाइजर या प्रोफेसर मिला है, तो उसमें लाइक जैसे नेटवर्क्स का है वो, और आपके नेटवर्क के प्रोजेक्ट में आपने सिक्योरिटी में भी काम किया हुआ है, आपने शायद में भी तीसरी फील्ड में भी काम किया हुआ है, तो अगर वो जिस पीएचडी के लिए आप अप्लाई कर रहे हो जिस पोजीशन के लिए, तो स्टार्ट विद द प्रोजेक्ट जो कि सबसे ज्यादा रिलेट करता हो उस पोजीशन से. तो हाँ, फर्स्ट प्रोजेक्ट आपका वो होना चाहिए और वो उस वाले पे ज्यादा फोकस करो, लाइक उसका काफी बड़ा पैराग्राफ होना चाहिए. बाकी जैसे मेरा वाला है, अब मेरी सीवी में लाइक जो मेरा मेन प्रोजेक्ट वही था, उसके बाद जो मेरा थर्ड पैराग्राफ है उसमें मेरा प्रोजेक्ट्स कंप्यूटर विजन और डीप लर्निंग है, जिनका लाइक दूर दूर तक ताल्लुक है नेटवर्क से। तो मैंने वो लिख दिया था, मगर लाइक मैंने उसको बिल्कुल लास्ट पे रखा है, क्योंकि उससे एटलीस्ट ये तो पता लग रहा है ना, अच्छा इसने इसके अलावा भी लाइक काम किया हुआ है, उसने रिसर्च की हुई है। तो लाइक स्टार्ट विद द वन जो कि सबसे ज्यादा रिलेट करता हो उस वाले पोजीशन से, और फिर बाकी उसी तरह मतलब लाइक ऑर्डर स्विच करते रहो, लाइक डिफरेंट एप्लीकेशंस के लिए आप ऑर्डर स्विच कर सकते हो, मगर जो पहला पैराग्राफ होगा वो वाला होना चाहिए जो उसके साथ सबसे ज्यादा रिलेट करता हो, और उस पर सबसे ज्यादा फोकस होना चाहिए आपका।
One thing I also want to add on to is the fact that when you're mentioning your paragraphs, so let's just imagine अगर आपके paragraphs boxes हो ना, तो दूर से नजर आ जाता है कौन सा आपका main project है, right? Like obviously क्योंकि जो आपका main project है जिसका आपके बारे में ज्यादा पता है, ज्यादा काम किया है, वो let's say 20 lines का होगा, बाकी सब let's say 10 lines के होंगे, so it's very visible. So this is something you should very much keep in your कि आप एक गंदे से प्रोजेक्ट को या छोटे से प्रोजेक्ट को इतना emphasize ना करो कि वो आपकी attention छीन ले मेन प्रोजेक्ट से, right? So make sure you do that, because this was something I got pointed out to as well कि आप गलत चीज को emphasize कर रही हो। So make sure, क्योंकि वो नजर तो आता है सबको, I mean सबको नजर आ रहा है पेपर पे, let's say if they have a printed out version, वो पता चल जाएगा कि सबसे ज्यादा content let's say इस particular paragraph में, you want to make sure that paragraph is the right paragraph. It's really important to play with your words. It's really, really, really important. And once again, I still want to mention just once more कि वो technical skills सिर्फ नहीं देख रहे होते. They want to see how well you're doing in research. So even if it's something as simple as reading a paper, mention it. Seriously, like it's important.
One more thing I would like to mention, just there was if there are a lot of situations when you are working in in lumps in the research with Dr. Farid or Dr. Ehsan. I don't know about Dr. Ehsan, but if you are working with Dr. Farid, the research group is quite large. So what happens is sometimes the research, your research project overlaps with someone else's research project, and what you end up doing is you might be making up tutorials or something like that for your own group or for the other groups as well. So if you do it that at some point, it might be a good idea to mention that as well, because it not only tells them that you know about your own research, but it also tells them that you are also good at teaching, which is something that you might have to do while you are teaching as assistant or something like that.
Yeah, I think like this is a perfect transition to our next part of the essay.
Just one last thing.
Okay.
अच्छा, by the way, जो important keywords होते हैं, I think we should highlight them. Like जैसे मेरा था, जैसे मेरे नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न के लिए था कि ना, जो उस एडवाइजर ने अपनी वेबसाइट पे स्पेसिफिकली मेंशन किया हुआ था कि उसको बंदे चाहिए जो कि सॉफ्टवेयर डिफाइंड प्रोग्रामिंग, जिनको सॉफ्टवेयर डिफाइंड नेटवर्क प्रोग्रामिंग आती है, लाइक एसडीएन प्रोग्रामिंग। तो लाइक मैंने की हुई थी वो, मगर इतनी डेप्थ में नहीं की हुई थी, मगर मैंने अपने एसओपी में जब लिखा तो मैंने उस वर्ड को एक्चुअली हाईलाइट किया था, क्योंकि वो स्कीमा वो करेंगे, वो कंप्लीट रीड नहीं करने वाले, राइट? अगर उसने वो देख लिया है ना कीवर्ड कि अच्छा इसने इस पे काम किया, क्या पता कुछ भी हो सकता है, लिनक्स कर्नल पे काम किया हो, लाइक यूआई यूएक्स में कुछ हो सकता है, लाइक जो आपका मेन कीवर्ड है ना उसे हाईलाइट कर दो, लाइक बोल्ड कर दो, एटलीस्ट वो स्किम भी कर रहे होंगे ना, तो फिर उनका आइडिया हो जाएगा अच्छा इसने इस पे तो काम किया हुआ है।
Yeah, I think this is really important, like especially अगर अच्छा होता क्या है, I don't know if some of you know it or not, but CS academia is very popular on Twitter. Like everybody's on Twitter and they send out random tweets about stuff. So if somebody's looking for students, they're actually going to like sometimes tweet about it. So if you especially come across a tweet or like a post by the direct faculty asking for students, then you should really follow what they have to say. अगर वो है भी नहीं तो शायद थोड़ा वो काम बना लो, because obviously they're looking for that. And one thing I will say honestly is, once you come here, you should consider your knowledge zero, because I mean, this is research. You don't need to know everything to be able to do it, because you will learn along the way. And this is what's expected of you. Okay, shayad aapko nahi aata ho pehle, that's okay. Like we just had a talk about it like last night, that Bilal was saying that he has to learn something from scratch, and that's okay in research. So you don't ever have to worry about the fact that कोई काम आपने नहीं किया हुआ तो आप नहीं सीख सकते. तो अगर जैसे SDN की एग्जांपल तो मेंशन कर दो, SDN बाद में if she asks for something तो कहते हैं ना कि like I mean they're not going to kill you if you do not know a lot about it. It's okay if you just know what the idea of SDN is, which itself is very complicated, mind you. So it's okay, like just mention stuff. Okay, do we have any more questions on this? you guys can discuss like your own problems as well. You know, I mean, I'd be happy to answer them, and I feel like they'd just be really relevant to everybody. Like if one of you in the audience has like some particular thing you want to discuss, maybe something about the fact that maybe you feel like your project isn't relevant or something of that sort, it would really help us like help you. And I mean, it's just me. Maybe if I see anybody, so I think I see them.
There's a private message. I'll mention that. So someone is asking that you mentioned that in the introduction you have to write a brief, like a brief summary of what your background is and what your motivation is. But should one like mention all of that in the next paragraphs as well and link that to kind of the, for example, if there's a project and that links very directly in the next paragraph, or just the intro that's enough?
I think if you're just mentioning something only in the interview, then that is only in the introduction, then I mean, depends. Like, okay, like I mentioned me being in the student council in the beginning, but then I never repeated it, right? But then I did mention federated learning in the beginning that I did repeat. So it's more about what you want things to turn out to, right? So like decide for yourself, this is your statement, this is your wordings, and this is how you play your words. So if you feel like that something does deserve a repeat, then mention it. If it does not, then don't mention it.
अच्छा, मैंने अपने इंट्रो में किया था कि मेरा जो इंट्रो था ना, देखो काइंड ऑफ ओवरऑल समरी थी मेरे एसओपी की, जैसे मैं शेयर करता हूँ। अच्छा हाँ, अब ये देखो कि लाइक मैंने तो पहले लिखी थी एक दो लाइन जो सब लाइक जेनेरिक लाइंस होती हैं, उसके बाद मैंने फिर उसके बाद सीधा स्टार्ट कर दिया था जैसे मेरे यहाँ से बिल्कुल वही है, लाइक समरी है काइंड ऑफ लाइक to further explore this area of research work under the supervision of necessary. और लाइक मैंने ये वाला मेरा यहाँ तक वो फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ है जो मैंने नीचे लिखा है, राइट? और उसके बाद ये मेरा जो सेकंड रिसर्च प्रोजेक्ट है मैंने उसको भी यहाँ पे एक लाइन में लाइक उसको भी समराइज कर दिया, ठीक है? तो अगर कोई मेरी ऐसी एसओपी कंप्लीट रीड नहीं भी कर रहा, तो अगर उसने पहला पैराग्राफ भी पढ़ा है और उस इस डोमेन से रिलेटेड है, तो आइडिया हो जाएगा इसने किस पे काम किया हुआ, राइट? तो मैंने ये किया था अपनी इस एसओपी में कि मेरा जो फर्स्ट पैराग्राफ था उसमें काइंड ऑफ वो समराइज्ड वर्जन था मेरी होल एसओपी का। तो ये भी
मेरा भी इसी तरह का था, मतलब मैंने भी ये किया हुआ था कि मेरी समरी थी वहाँ पे इंट्रोडक्शन।
There's another question. Do you want to take these questions at the end, or should I ask them now? They're a bit irrelevant to what we're talking about right now. They're not related to the SOP. Is that fine?
I mean, like, I'm interested.
Okay. So the first question is, if we have worked with one instructor, can we ask them for a letter of recommendation? And the second question is how to ask other instructors to write a letter of recommendation who don't know you as much.
Okay, my take on the letter of recommendation is the fact that communication is a very important key. There's no harm in asking people. There's no harm in just going up to somebody and asking them that, sir, I need a recommendation. And since I was in a class with you, do you think you'd be able to write one for me? That's okay. I mean, just like it's okay for them to say no, it's okay for you to ask as well. But obviously you have to make sure you're respectable. You have to make sure you're not disrespecting him. You have to make sure that you're not telling him that you are the bigger personality over here, because he is, right? That being said, it is also okay, and it is also very, very, very smart to ask the person if they'll write you a good recommendation, right? Like, they agree, first of all, just ask them if they're willing to write you one. And you should also give a few reasons why you think they should be able to write you one, so that it could also help them remember, because they won't remember you. Until and unless you were like relatives or something, they're not going to remember you. So you have to remind them that I was in this class of yours and I got an A, and I also worked with you, and I also had some, maybe let's say an interesting chat about STNs with you. So tell them that. Share your CV. If you have a draft of SOP, share that. If you know the universities you're applying to, share that in the email as well. It's all really good information for them to know. Especially if you are if you're aiming for higher ranked universities, you should tell that professor that let's say I'm planning on going to MIT, and I need you to write a recommendation for that. If they agree, after you giving all of this information, if they reply to you and they go like, yeah, sure, I feel like I'd be happy to do it, then you go like, Yeah, thank you so much. I was just wondering if you could comment on how well do you think you'd be able to write a letter of recommendation for me. This in itself is an okay question, but if you feel like you want to be more nicer, more kind, and not at all mean, then you should like just go like that. I feel like because I'm applying to like high ranked universities, I feel like I really need strong recommendations, and I just wanted to ask if you think you'd be if you know me enough to write it. It's not at all a bad thing to ask, and they will give you a very straight reply because उनको भी पता है आप कैसी position पे हो, right? So this is my take on letter of recommendations. This communication is the key. Never shy off from clearing your doubts. And उस perspective पे if you want to know कि आपने किससे लिखवाना है किससे नहीं लिखवाना, obviously देखो अब मेरे पास भी इतने options हैं letter of recommendation के. I mean एक आध कोई ऐसा बंदा होता है जिसको आप जबरदस्ती घुसाते हो अपनी list of recommendations पे. तो ask everybody, ask people who are on your list, see who replies, get in touch with them. कुछ लोग सच में अच्छे होते हैं जो कोर्स की बेस पे भी काफी अच्छी recommendation देते हैं. So it's okay, but I think like I said, the whole thing loops back to talk about what you want, talk about your expectations, and see if they can meet them or not. It's okay if they agree and you go like I'm so sorry that I do not think I want a recommendation from you anymore. Just go like it's okay. I mean, as long as you communicate though, as long as you do tell them, you don't have to just be blank about the whole situation. And
I guess again, yeah.
no
Yeah, go ahead.
no.
Okay, so I guess again approaching the instructors is like one thing I shied out from. I thought that he might not give me a recommendation because I did not know him that much after the fundamental computer systems or to CS 225. So I just a friend totally pushed me to go and ask him. He was sitting there having a cup of tea, and I randomly approached him, and he said yes, and then we discussed the things later further. So yeah, so it is always a good idea to approach the faculty, and the other one was. Yeah, if I would not have approached him, I might not have gotten that extra recommendation. So it is always a good idea to approach. Yeah.
सेम मेरा भी काइंड ऑफ था कि मेरे थर्ड लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन मेरे पास पे नहीं था, तो मैंने बस उनको रैंडमली ईमेल कर दी थी क्योंकि वो सब वर्चुअल था, तो मैंने उनको ईमेल कर दी थी कि मगर ईमेल में मैंने उनको बता दिया हाँ स्टार्ट मैंने यही कि जैसे मलिहा ने बताया मैंने स्टार्ट ऐसे ही किया था कि मैंने ये 2 टीएशिप्स किए हैं और बाकी फिर मैंने उनको बता दिया अच्छा मैं करंटली इस पे काम कर रहा हूँ, लेकिन अपना प्रोजेक्ट का थोड़ा बता दिया और फिर उसके बाद बता दिया था कि आई बी अप्लाइंग फॉर पीएचडी दिस सेमेस्टर. तो और फिर मैंने लास्ट में ये पूछ लिया था उनको डायरेक्टली कि वुड यू बी विलिंग टू राइट अ ग्रेट लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन. मैंने ये लाइन ऐड की थी उसमें और फिर डॉक्टर उनका रिप्लाई मुझे क्या आया था कि आई विल राइट अ गुड वन बट इट वुड नॉट बी अ ग्रेट वन. उनका एग्जैक्ट ये लाइन लिखी थी मैंने. लाइक वो बता देते हैं कि वो कैसा लिखेंगे, तो आपको पता लग जाता है कि आपको उसको एज अ थर्ड लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन यूज करना है या सेकंड लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन यूज करना है. तो जब उन्होंने मुझे बता दिया कि वो लाइक गुड होगा ग्रेट नहीं होगा, तो मुझे खुद मतलब पता लग गया था ओके ऑब्वियसली ये थर्ड होने वाला है मेरा. तो हाँ, तो ये पूछ लो डायरेक्टली उनसे, मतलब बता देंगे क्योंकि उनको पता होता है लाइक अगर वो आपको अच्छे से जानते हैं, उनको पता है आपका आपने अच्छे परफॉर्म किया हुआ है तो फिर ऑब्वियसली वो अच्छा लिखेंगे. मगर अगर आपके उनके साथ ज्यादा इंटरेक्शंस नहीं हुई तो वो लिख देंगे, मगर हाँ शायद इतना अच्छा नहीं हो, मगर सही है. थर्ड इतना अच्छा होना भी नहीं चाहिए, मतलब सही है, अगर नॉर्मल है तो सही है. पहले तो अच्छे होने चाहिए, थर्ड अगर बस नॉर्मल है एवरेज है तो चलता है.
चलता है, लेकिन फिर भी आई वुड से आप तीसरे बंदे से भी पूछो. मतलब कभी कभी योर थर्ड प्रोफेसर इज सो नाइस दैट इवन दो दे डोंट नो यू अ लॉट, दे आर विलिंग टू राइट अ रियली गुड वन. So don't work with assumptions yourself. And I love how Haris gave an example about what he wrote and the reply he got, because ये होता है and it's really good to like ask. Do you guys want to add on something? There's another question in the chat that I already answered like halfway, and I was just wondering if you want to
I'm
add.
not sure कि पता नहीं अगर ज्यादा रिकमेंडेशन तो क्या होगा, क्योंकि मैं उन्होंने लिखा होता है कि 1 चाहिए 2 चाहिए 3 चाहिए, I would say कि जितना उन्होंने लिखा होता है उतनी सेंड कर दो. I don't know, like मैंने तो उतनी की थी, like जैसे अभी यहाँ पे पूछा हुआ किसी ने कि हाँ what do you think about getting more than 3 recommendations?
Definitely.
पता है हाँ
आप भी सेंड कर दो. It's just that अगर आपके पास let's say 4 बंदे विलिंग हैं तो आप कॉम्बिनेशन बना सकते हो 3-3 की.
By the way, what I did was, it might not be the best thing to do. So again at Purdue, I tagged up on the recommendation letters. So all the recommendation letters I had, I used all of them at the Purdue. So I don't know, it was 4 recommendation or 5 recommendation, but it was everyone who was willing to write a recommendation letter. Everyone else, I was using it on Purdue. So I don't know, it might work. It may work for you as well. If you have the minimum number of recommendations, it is fine.
What about sending more than the minimum? No, don't, because they might recommendations bomb नहीं होंगी because कोई इतना अच्छा नहीं है लफ्ज़ है कि वो
शायद
चार
थर्ड रेट भी ना
लोग आपको
करते
मिल
हो,
जाए इतनी
मतलब
अच्छी
हाँ
आप
वैसे वो
लिखे।
फर्स्ट और सेकंड ज्यादा रेट करते होंगे, थर्ड पे शायद वो जाते भी ना हो क्योंकि इतना टाइम नहीं होता उन पर।
एक मैं बात बताऊं, आपका रेकमेंडर कौन है वो बहुत मैटर करता है, लाइक वो genuinely बहुत मैटर करता है because so and after coming over here actually the network community set and then they talk about it, like they sent in a recommendation what to do about it, like they actually discuss it, so it does matter. Like जो बिलाल strategy बता रहे थे about asking people from Purdue to write, so like yeah, if you want to apply to California,
I needed
जस्ट बाय द लाइक मैं यहाँ पे ऐड कर देता हूँ कि लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशंस आर द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट। लाइक इतना अपना एसओपी इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं होगा, इतना आपका जीपे इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं होगा, अगर आपके पास अच्छी लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन है ना तो सब कुछ आउटवे कर जाएगा वो। क्योंकि मेरे साथ हुआ है ये अब मेरा यूडब्ल्यू मेडिसिन में ये था कि मैंने जो अप्लाई किया था तो मेरा जीपे 6.79 था और मुझसे ऊपर उस यूनिवर्सिटी में 3 लोगों ने अप्लाई किया था, उन सबका जीपे मुझसे ज्यादा था, राइट। इसीलिए मुबशिर और मेरा हो गया था, और ये भी था क्योंकि हमने शायद सेम प्रोजेक्ट पे काम किया हुआ था, क्योंकि पहले हमारा कभी यूडब्ल्यू मेडिसिन में एडमिशन नहीं हुआ, आई थिंक 3.8 से नीचे कभी नहीं हुआ, मोस्टली 3.9 प्लस होते हैं या 4.0 होते हैं। तो मुबशिर और मेरा हो गया था, तो उसकी मेन रीजन सिर्फ यही थी क्योंकि मेरा जीपे तो ऑब्वियसली नहीं था, क्योंकि मुझसे ऊपर 3 लोगों ने अप्लाई किया हुआ है, उनका जीपे मुझसे ज्यादा है और उनकी सीवीज भी मुझसे अच्छी हैं, मगर वो सिर्फ एक लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन था जिसने गेम चेंज किया है। तो अगर आपके पास कोई अच्छा लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन है तो आपको इतनी टेंशन लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, आपके एसओपी सही है, बस काम चल जाएगा, क्योंकि वो लेटर ऑफ रिकमेंडेशन से ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है। और अगर वो किसी और लाइक यूएस यूनिवर्सिटी वाले प्रोफेसर है ना तो फिर तो कंप्लीटली गेम चेंज हो जाती है।
By the way,
वो ट्विटर की वो जो कम्युनिटी है ना उसका भी थोड़ा यहाँ पे गेम आता है, लाइक पीपल नो पीपल बाय नेम, लाइक people will know, like if I say a name of a professor over here, people will know who I'm talking about, what they do, and like it's almost like a big family type thing. So US की recommendation is good, but अगर नहीं हो तो कोई बात नहीं, I mean मेरी नहीं थी, but I'm still.
Yep. By the way, even in Purdue, there were 2 people who had more GPA and probably better research experience as compared to mine. But the thing was, the only difference between my application and there was other than the GPA and the other stuff was that I had one extra letter of recommendation. Even if the person is not directly related to your field, if he vouches for you that this person is disciplined and this he works well, so he is good at learning, so that could be helpful. Our professor said that they would be writing the recommendation letter a bit late. If your university has not like dead set deadline for sending the recommendation letter, it is totally fine. They include it in they consider it during the admission process. My letter was also written quite a bit late.
But yeah, अगर कोई hard deadline नहीं है तो इतना मसला नहीं होता, लेकिन अगर वो mid January तक पे लिख रहे हैं ना तो सही है, एक्सेप्ट हो जाता है, इतना नहीं होता।
जनरली थोड़ा ये सीन होता है कि यूनिवर्सिटी होती है ना, डेडलाइंस उनकी क्रिसमस से पहले होती हैं, लेकिन वो क्रिसमस के बाद ही चेक करते हैं, बट आई वुड स्टिल बी ऑन द सेफ साइड, टॉक टू योर यूनिवर्सिटी, टेल देम दिस इज द सिचुएशन। वो लोग भी अंडरस्टैंड करते हैं कि वो प्रोफेसर जो होते हैं किंग्स होते हैं, इट्स वेरी हार्ड टू कन्विंस देम, तो टॉक टू देम अबाउट इट। एंड अगर वो काफी सेट है अपनी हार्ड डेडलाइन पे तो फरात, आई थिंक आप तो मेंशन कर रहे थे आपके पास एक्स्ट्रा रिकमेंडेशंस हैं, तो यूज देम। दिस इज अ गुड वे टू लाइक मिक्स एंड चूज। फिर आप देखो ना कि कौन बिलेंगे टाइम पे लिखने के लिए, कुछ यूनिवर्सिटीज हार्ड करती है। जैसे मैं अगर अपने एग्जांपल दूं, people told me that I would not hear back from my university till at least like a month after Christmas while break, but I actually even had my offer by mid-January, because major advisor there, he literally started looking, like I remember I had my distributed systems exam next day and he wanted to meet me for my interview, and I mean exam tha, so I would say this was like December 23 or something. I don't even think वो Christmas celebrate करते थे or something, whatever, like yeah, like सब same नहीं होते, but best to check out with them as well, because you know, every year the situation is different and it would obviously just be in your favor. Do we have any other questions?
I actually have a question. So my question is pretty unrelated to the ongoing discussion, but since you guys are here, I really want to ask. So I'm a junior And at this point, I haven't really started reaching out to instructors for, research work or started working with any instructor so far. But I do see my friends and my batchmates reaching out and, doing some sort of either directed coursework or some working on some research project with an instructor. And while at this stage, I haven't really decided if I'm going to apply for a PhD or a master's program, I'm still starting to panic. I haven't, started any concrete research work. And while senior project is obviously there, senior year mein, but I want to ask you, how soon should one start reaching out to their instructors to, work on any research related project? And should I just immediately start going to instructors and, inquiring अगर कोई इस तरह मुझे काम मिल सकता है, या is it okay to maybe wait till spring of junior year or even summer? And so what's the timeline for that, and what advice do you guys have in that regard?
If I were to talk about myself, I started research junior spring maybe. I did not meet any professors. I would not go into their office hours. I would not do that, which is something wrong at my end. But I mean, it's okay if you do not do it, because I'm just trying to tell you that मैंने भी नहीं किया था. That being said, in my humble opinion, you should go talk to people like professors. It's not bad. They're not going to eat you. They're not going to limit you. They're not going to do anything. Just go up to their office and maybe just even talk about the fact that you're confused. Everybody will have something different to say, and everybody will be helpful to you. And आपको पता है, professors, especially at LUMS, do not have a lot of students. तो उन्होंने कभी भी आपको भगाना नहीं है. You have to do your own work as well. You are the one who has to go meet people. You are the one who might have to do some short readings, पर जो आपको professors guide करते हैं, and you are the one whose energy is going to use up, right? लेकिन फायदा भी आपका हो रहा है इसके अंदर, राइट? क्योंकि अगर आपने रिसर्च करनी है तो आपको पता चल जाएगा आपने रिसर्च करनी है, और अगर आपने रिसर्च नहीं करनी तो वो भी आपको पता चल जाएगा. एंड आई मीन बेटर अर्ली देन लेट, राइट? Then you can maybe plan your senior year project accordingly. You can decide that no, research is not for me. I should go for a professor जो research projects नहीं करते, who prefers like more practical projects. So yeah, I would say I'm not saying, I'm not criticizing you. I'm not saying that what you did was incredibly stupid. It was something I did as well. But if I were to have a redo, this is what I would change. I would talk to more people and I would ask them for their help. And I would also work on it, because there's no other way. You cannot just sit there and expect people to approach you, because they will not. I hope that helps, and I hope that does not make you feel bad about yourself, because I'm in no way trying to do that. I had to go through it. The biggest problem with for me was the fact that the people I hung out with at SSE, not saying everybody, one of my friends is actually here. I hope he does not think it's about him. It's more about the fact that the people I actually did hang out with, हमारी ये strategy होती थी, okay, assignments done, classes taken, quizzes done, that is it. Out of SSE, right at Khoka, right? That was my strategy. But I feel like beyond a point, I should have at least approached some people pehle, not only you but you. So do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks a lot, Maliha.
No worries.